The California Transportation hearing on the draft 2020 Interregional Transportation Improvement Program will be called to order. Doug, would you please call the roll?
Good morning. Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. Commissioner Alvarado, Commissioner Burke, Commissioner Butler, Commissioner Dunn, Commissioner Gilmetti, Commissioner Gardino, Commissioner Kehoe, Commissioner Norton, Commissioner Tavaloni, Commissioner Van Konynenberg.
Here.
Chair Inman, Senator Bell, Assemblymember Frazier. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Doug, would you please go over the emergency procedures?
Yes, exit procedures out the door. To your left, there are a set of stairs out front, and the gathering point is out in front of the building on the sidewalk nearest to the cul-de-sac. If you have a medical emergency, let us know. We will call 911 and have them come to you. Please don't try to exit and make your own way. We'll bring assistance to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Doug. The Commission exists to make transportation funding and planning more accessible and accountable and transparent. Having hearings like this are part of that process. I welcome you. If you would like to speak today, I would ask that you would fill out a speaker card and hand the speaker card to Doug. We will be going in the order in which those are turned in. At this time, I'd like to turn the meeting over to Susan Branson, Executive Director.
Thank you for attending the first of two hearings that are required on the draft 2020 Interregional. For the second hearing that is required on the draft 2020 Interregional Transportation Improvement Program. Upon receipt of the final 2020 Interregional Transportation Improvement Program that Caltrans submits to the Commission will hold two more hearings, one north and one south, on the final ITIP. Government Code Section 14526 requires that the Commission hold at least two hearings, one in Northern California and the other in Southern California, to reconcile any objections by any member of the public or other stakeholder to the draft Interregional Transportation Improvement Program. The Interregional Transportation Improvement Program is a very critical component of the STIP, as it provides funding for projects to improve state highways, projects to improve the intercity passenger rail system, and projects to improve interregional improvement and movement of people, vehicles, and goods. In its adopted policies and procedures specific to the 2020 STIP, the Commission identified its expectations and priorities. For example, for the 2020 STIP, the Commission expects to give priority to the reprogramming of projects from the 2018 STIP as amended, and to new projects to meet county shares for the period ending in 23-24. Members of the public wishing to comment on the draft proposed ITIP should fill out a speaker's card and can comment following the Caltrans' presentation. And with that, I'll turn it back to the Commission's Vice Chair.
Thank you, Susan. I'll now turn it over to Teresa to give us an overview of the draft 2020 Interregional Transportation Improvement Program.
Thank you, Vice Chair. The STIP is a 5-year program of capital investments adopted biannually in even number years. It is comprised of two broad programs: the Regional Improvement Program that takes 75% of the STIP capacity, and the Interregional Improvement Program that takes 25% of the STIP capacity. The Interregional Program is further subdivided by statute, with 60% going outside urbanized areas on the interregional road system, with 15% minimum for intercity rail. 40% can go anywhere in the state, subject to the 60-40 split. Government code requires that by October 15th of each odd number year, and after consulting with the transportation planning agencies, county transportation commissions, and transportation authorities, Caltrans shall submit to the Commission the draft 5-year ITIP. Statute also requires that by November 15th of each odd numbered year, the Commission hold at least two hearings, one in the north and one in the south. The purpose of the hearings is to reconcile any objections by any member of the public or other stakeholders to the draft ITIP. The draft ITIP was sent to the Commission on October 1st, and it was posted on the department's website. The North hearing was held on October 8th in Modesto, California. After the ITIP hearings, Caltrans staff will prepare the final ITIP and shall consider the input received at these hearings. The final ITIP shall include a summary of major comments received at the hearings and responses to those comments. Final ITIP and RTIPs are due to the Commission by December 15th. Staff will compile all the proposals into one document that will be presented as required at the STIP hearings in January and February. After the hearings, staff will publish recommendations for the 2020 STIP by February 28, 2020, and the Commission will adopt the STIP at the March 25th Commission meeting. In August, the 2020 STIP fund estimate was adopted by the Commission. The fund estimate identified the new funding capacity for the 2020 STIP at $569 million, and the capacity was only available in the last 2 years of the STIP. The formula distribution for the ITIP was a little bit under $159 million. In the 2018 STIP, the ITIP advanced their shares by $107 million. This amount had to be deducted from the new formula distribution. This left a net new capacity available for the interregional program of approximately $52 million. All new projects proposed for funding must be consistent with the ITSP, must have a project study report, and must be fully funded. Vice Chair, that concludes my remarks.
Thank you. And now I'd like to call Bruce DeTerra from Caltrans to come up and make a presentation on the draft 2020 Interregional Transportation Improvement Program.
Good morning, Mr. Commissioner, Madam Executive Director, Teresa. Thank you very much for having me here to give a presentation today. My presentation will vary from what I did in Modesto due to some of the input we received at the hearing through the public comment period, and then also we've received, of course, as you have, dozens of written comments. So I'm adjusting my slides to address some of those, but you have posted the original hearing on your website, so it still remains as part of the public record and available for viewing for those who want to see that specific hearing. So this one will have variation. So this is not different. The ITIP's purpose is set in government code, California Government Code, to improve state highways, to improve intercity passenger rail system, and to projects to improve the interregional movement of people, vehicles, and goods. This remains consistent. The Streets and Highways Code also addresses this matter, so it's both in Government Code and Streets and Highways Code. And Streets and Highways Code goes into more detail, and it specifies modes that are eligible for ITIP funding. And this was done through Senate Bill 45 in 1998 that split the STIP between the regional agencies and the state, with the state receiving 25%. And this dictates how it is that the state should consider where we place our money, because we do have that flexibility. And as Teresa went through the remarks about the splits between north and south and urban and rural, it also talks about the modes, and Susan addressed that a little bit as well, passenger rail, transit guideways, grade separations, and of course highways as well. So they are all legitimate uses of the funding for the STIP, and this funding is constitutionally protected. It can't be diverted away for other purposes, so that's important to keep in mind, that when we're talking about using some of these funds for passenger rail, that is entirely consistent with existing state law that has been in effect for quite some time. The ITSP is required to be consistent with the ITIP, or the ITIP to be consistent with the ITSP, the Interregional Transportation Strategic Plan. And that is a plan that the department now updates on a 5-year cycle. It initially was put together voluntarily by the department to guide how it is that we use our funding in there. So the current version is being governed by the 2015 ITSP. So that is, the projects we're selecting are consistent with that. There will be an update for the ITSP that will take place next spring. You'll be seeing that. But the work for it will be beginning shortly in 2020. So what the ITSP does is it tells us to invest our resources on the most strategic interregional corridors. These are the corridors that are connecting the major urbanized areas, but also connecting the rural areas with each other and connecting our rural areas with urban areas. So as you can see by the map, it covers that rather well in there. Eligible highways are considerably more than what's depicted on this map. The interregional road system is legislatively set, and there are 93 routes on there, so there's quite a bit more of a network. But most of that network is indeed actually contained within these broad bands of the corridors that are depicted here. And this is where the department has been focusing its ITIP resources since the first ITSP, and we've accomplished quite a lot in partnership with our regional partners and local partners as well. On the intercity passenger rail system, where we're also not only eligible to invest, we're also required to invest a minimum of the 25%. So 15% of that 25% must be used on intercity passenger rail. There is not a cap on that. We can spend more than 15%, but that is a minimum. And we have been investing that primarily on the three state-supported systems, the San Joaquins, the Capital Corridors, and the Surfliner systems. But we are eligible to invest on other such corridors as well. So for the 25% of the STIP funding for a 2020 cycle, as Teresa pointed out, we had roughly a $52 million capacity after considering the $107 million in advancements that we made in 2018 to try to get ahead in advanced projects to match up funding with the SB1 program so that we could bring as much forward to deliver as quickly as possible and to take advantage of this funding. As part of the theory behind this, and I was closely involved in it in selecting the projects to advance during that process, was to try to set projects up for this 2020 cycle so that they would be ready to use what we presumed would be a substantial ITIP capacity to then bring these projects forward to the next programming cycle. So what often happens with projects that had been delayed for a long period of time are now coming forward ready for construction. They have cost increases that need to be accounted for before they come in for their actual allocations. And that, ironically, comes out to be approximately $52 million, which leaves us $164,000 of a positive balance in the ITIP starting out with our capacity. We did not anticipate that. Had we anticipated that, we probably would not have advanced so much because we tied our hands in 2018 for all decisions related to the ITIP during this cycle. Which was unfortunate that we made that decision at the time because it put us somewhat in this situation that we're in today. So this is the variability of the ITIP, and I realize many folks have seen this numerous times, but it is instructive to remind us where we've been on this and the nature of the variability of the ITIP program. I think there was an expectation, I certainly shared it, that this ITIP cycle would be different. And so what's not reflected in this chart is that because we advanced that $107 million in 2018, that 2018 bar is much higher than it would have otherwise been by $100 million, and we would have moved that $100 million over to 2020. So you actually would see more of an evening of the funding beginning. And going forward, there's going to be far less variability due to the way that SB1 sets the STIP revenues. So for this 2020 ITIP proposal, I'm leaving what it is we're proposing the same with what was published in the document that was posted, but in the presentation, as I did before, I'm noting changes that we are making or we're acknowledging in the commission hearing here because of information that we received from partner agencies at the beginning of this process when we first posted this document on October 1st. That it actually inadvertently posted before October 1st. October 1st was the official date, but as we were working with our systems to have it posted, it became available on that Friday before. And so some folks had it before the 1st, and so on the 1st, we had people calling and had already talked about it, and that's where I learned that one of the projects had already started a phase that we were proposing to deprogram. So we're reversing that proposal to bring that back in. But we are carrying forward from the 2018 cycle, 573 rounded $1 million worth of projects, and funding the cost increases on 3 projects. This is what we're proposing with that $164,000 capacity that I mentioned. We are proposing to deprogram 1 project, rail project that's in the Los Angeles region, and take that same value of funding and program it on a different project serving the Surfliner. Both projects would serve the Surfliner. And this is in consultation and coordination with the region, with Metro, and they are in concurrence with this. So now we're going to get into where we haven't reached concurrence. We are also proposing to deprogram at this point 2 phases. It says here 3 phases, but we're removing the PAED phase for the Tulare City project from the proposed deletion list. We had a value of approximately $2 million. Tulare had started work on that, and we were unaware because the charges, the fiscal charges for doing that work did not show up against the ITIP funds because they weren't using ITIP funds for that work, and they shouldn't have been. So they were doing what they were supposed to be, and we were unaware that that work initiated. But I received a phone call from Tulare informing of that, and so we made a rather quick decision in consultation with CalSTA to remove that. So we're down to approximately 30 million rather than the 32. We had cost savings on another Tulare project, and that speaks well of the delivery process and the partnerships that we've been striving to squeeze the most money as possible out of these projects to try to invest as much as we can to turn that around. And you see that as well in the TCIF programs where we're continually putting the funding to work again. So in this proposal, that funding we're proposing to take forward and hold it in a reserve for future decision-making that the earlier decisions in 2018 precluded our being able to make. We also are proposing to exchange $20 million in Proposition 1B Highway 99 bonds for ITIP funding that had been committed to the Tulare Tega section. We have done exchanges of funding in the past, and we likely will do exchanges in the funding in the future. That the funding will be reinvested, but we cannot guarantee where that funding will be reinvested. So at this point, I know there's a great desire to say that all of this funding will be put back into the valley, but we can't provide that guarantee. So we are now proposing to retain approximately $59 million in total in a reserve to be determined for application primarily to intercity passenger rail, but also to other purposes that are meeting the state's greenhouse gas reduction goals and VMT reduction goals. And it's important to recognize that the state, the Fix It First, the SB1, one of the key focus areas of that remains for the state the highest priority and fully backed. We're not backing away from any of the commitments that are set in statute by SB1 or SB 45 or other funding programs. We are staying within that, and as the Secretary pointed out at the Commission meeting last week in Modesto, executive orders and policies like that do not supersede state law. We will be following the state law at the same time that we also pursue the policy statements and guides that we have there. So I wanted to, there's been a lot of discussion on the highway corridors where we are proposing to deprogram phases of a couple of projects. So I wanted to be sure to cover the history of some of the investments, and hopefully this will help demonstrate that We are fully invested as a state in meeting the needs of these corridors. We're not abandoning them. We have a tremendous amount across multiple funding levels and programs. So here on the Highway 46 corridor, and I'll show you a map of the area that we're covering, since 2006, and we picked that point because that was the Proposition 1B, and when the Proposition 1B 99 projects started. So that seemed like a really good milestone. We invested substantially in these corridors prior to 2006 with ITIP funds as well and SHOP. But here for the Highway 46 corridor since 2006, the state has invested $535 million to upgrade this facility, both through capacity expansion to going from 2 lanes to 4 lanes, and some of those things making grade separated intersections, but also doing the necessary work on the SHOP program. So you may look at the SHOP and think, wow, that's really not very much SHOP money on that corridor, but take in consideration, essentially we're reconstructing the entire corridor from Highway 101 to Interstate 5. And we're doing that in coordination with the regional agencies. Now this funding doesn't include any regional measure that would be available through RTIPs, local programs, or federal grants. So this is where this is a status that's relatively current. I mean, with projects that are in delivery process, the status changes, but this is current as of the release of the document. So the blue portion that you see in the middle in San Luis Obispo County on the east side, those are projects that are in the current ITIP that are still moving forward, that they will within the 2020 ITIP cycle go to construction. So we'll be coming to the commission for a construction allocation for these corridors when they reach their fiscal year date of programming. The green lines are ones where we've already completed the construction, that those are open to the public and the projects are functioning. The orange on the far east or the far right, that project is actually actively under construction, and the one right next to it is one that is still working on getting its full funding so that it too can come in for construction allocation. The Antelope grade section, which is just over the border from Kern County in San Luis Obispo County, that is a section that is subject to our proposed deprogramming of the PS&E, and it's also the right-of-way phase. They're combined within that. That project has completed its PA&ED phase, so it is eligible. In 2018, we had advanced those funds trying to get a jump, thinking that we would get ready for construction funding, presuming that would perhaps be available in 2020, so we could start funding that. The very large, the very publicly noticed project at the Y and the intersection with Highway 41, that project is staying on schedule, is going to be constructed within the 2020 funding cycle. We are not doing anything that would delay it or otherwise jeopardize its delivery. For the San Joaquin Valley, we've invested substantially more. And I want to point out that for the Highway 99 corridors, though individual project phases sometimes are not, they don't have multi-funding, that it may be a phase is fully funded through the ITIP. As a whole, the entire corridor has been a partnership with all the regional agencies in the state. We couldn't have achieved this without that. We wouldn't have a Highway 99 bond program if that partnership didn't exist. And so you can see here that the state, again, this is just the state revenue, has been putting substantial investment in the Highway 99 corridor, and we're not abandoning that corridor. The tremendous, the SHOP 1.6 billion shows you that we're really, that fix it first, take care of the system that we've already got is really taken to heart. And that corridor receives quite a beating from all the vehicles that are using it. And it is the backbone of the main street of the Central Valley. We recognize that, and it's very important to pursue that. Let's see, what else? So the interregional program, even though we're proposing to deprogram 2 phases on this, the ITIP has in the past funded $486 million. And in fact, during this ITIP round, combined the Highway 99 corridor projects that are still moving forward, combined with the Highway 46 projects that are still moving forward, is in excess of 40% of this ITIP's funding capacity. So in no way are we abandoning this highway. We're merely going to be deferring investments on 2 phases within 2 projects to create some capacity so we can make some other decisions on projects that are high priority for the state. And that doesn't diminish the priority for this quarter for the state by doing that. We have to do multiple things at the same time in order to move forward. So this is a history of the effort on 99 to essentially take the entire facility from its junction with I-5 to Sacramento to a minimum capacity of 3 lanes in each direction. In this, if you look closely, and I realize you can't see this on the screen, much of that has been accomplished, much of it still remains to be done, and we're required continued investment and continued partnership in order to do this. And we will have to, as we've done with the ITIP in the past, as we've had funding variability, we will take 2 or 3 steps forward, and sometimes we may have to take a half a step back. In 2016, we had to take 2 or 3 steps backwards. That was a daunting thing. And in 2018, we did our utmost to bring those projects back in. And a lot of, we tried really hard not to actually upend any of the Highway 99 projects such that it necessitated their actual full deletion from the ITIP. We are not proposing to do that with the current 2. We're just putting those 2 phases on pause until the next funding round where we identify other funding sources. And this is the north or the south portion of the quarter, sorry. And we've accomplished quite a lot there, but there are some very large mileage-wise portions that still remain in the 4-lane status, 2 lanes in each direction. On the rail side, mentioned the deprogramming of one project at Raymer, which is in the San Fernando Valley, on the rail line that goes through the middle of the valley, and that is the Surfliner in Metro's system, uses that track, shared with the Union Pacific Railroad. This is where the funding that would be moved to program for Link US, and it's not Link the United States, it's Link Union Station. Union Station is at the core of Southern California's rail system with the trains passing through there. And as those of you who have traveled in there know, that this depiction showing it crossing a freeway, that crossing doesn't exist. And that's part of what they're going to be doing so that trains can continue through the station and continue on rather than having to back out and take the same tracks they came in on, thus creating capacity issues. I believe we have a speaker here from Metro who would like to give more details regarding this project. And this is a Metro-led project. The department is not the lead agency on this project. We're a funding partner on this. And this is more of a schematic showing that they're looking at individual tracks, structures, improvements to Union Station itself. There's a lot in here, and that our funding would be contributing to specific parts of this project. Again, they will be providing more details on the project itself. So on the highway side, this is the totality of what the 2020 ITIP is proposing to do. The projects around the state, you'll notice that there's quite a concentration in just a few areas of the state. You'll see that there are no highway projects proposed for the San Diego region. There are no highway projects proposed for Southern California SCAG region. There are no highway projects proposed for the Bay Area, and there are no highway projects proposed for the SACOG region. And that's because these are interregional projects. So we've been investing, and we in the history of investing in the connections between the regions, and we will continue that history going into the future. So when asked why it is, and I've been asked, and I've got quite a bit of written correspondence asking why are we doing this to the San Joaquin Valley, and we're not doing this to the valley. These are essentially the only projects that we have that we can draw revenue from. There aren't projects in the urbanized areas that we can draw the funding from. So that becomes a very difficult thing to try to explain, and we're not abandoning the projects. So that's an important point. This is the funding table. Sorry, you can't read it. There's a change in the table. We emphasize, in the past, the table specifically said delete, and people construed that as deleting the project. And we're not proposing to delete the project. We're proposing to deprogram a phase. The project is still a viable project that we will be pursuing in partnership. The same, and here are the three projects. So again, there are notes within here, though, that we show three phases being deprogrammed. We are not proposing to deprogram Tulare City PAAD. On the rail side, you can see here's the urban concentration of the rail projects. There are some investments on in the Central Coast, and then also you can see there are three separate projects on the San Joaquin Valley, and then also between Stockton and the Bay Area. So that these investments clearly serve the valley for there, and so the passenger rail. And again, there are no ITIP investments. Well, there are very little rail investments proposed for the dense urban areas, one in Los Angeles, the Metro one, and then a couple more. And their funding tables. So with, let's see, I believe that is my last slide. Yes, so I do want to emphasize, and I recognize that our communication coming from my program within Caltrans was not ideal in terms of putting this information out ahead of time for agencies to respond to and weigh in on. We fell short in that, and I'll take responsibility for the falling short. This came together very close to when we wanted to submit it to the commission. We did submit it 2 weeks prior to the actual required date within legislation, and we did that in part because we finally got to the point of knowing what we were going to be proposing and wanted to get that to you and all the partners as quickly as possible after that point, and not take 2 weeks to give them a heads up that this was coming out. Is just get it there, get it out there, and then start getting the feedback. That is the purpose of the public hearing, and I think it's very good that we have a north and south hearing. We're getting the feedback, it's being heard, it's being discussed, and this is doing exactly what I believe the intent was in requiring these. And we will certainly be considering and responding to the correspondence, both verbal testimony people get. We appreciate that you record and make this available so that we can track that and go back and have somebody take notes on all that. So it's very helpful. And with that, I'd be happy to either take any questions or sit to the side so that others may speak.
Thank you, Bruce. So normally how these hearings work is commissioners ask questions of the presenter, and then we have a time of public comment, and then we return to the commission for commission comments. Given that I am the only commissioner here, I was sent some questions by other commissioners who could not make this meeting, so I'll be asking some questions of you, Bruce, if that's okay. So state law requires that the department shall submit to the commission the draft ITIP after consulting with the transportation planning agencies,
Yes.
county transportation commissions, and the transportation authorities. So in your statement, you just acknowledged that didn't happen in this case, correct?
I did in terms of the final document. We had been consulting in partnership with our districts much earlier in the year as we started looking at putting together the 2020 ITIP. We typically start that work in January and February, and in the spring really ramp up to talk with everybody about what their needs are. We get a lot of requests for that, and we work on compiling things of what's deliverable. At that time, we did not know we were going to have such a limited funding capacity, so we were very encouraging. And for those folks who were on the other side of the phone calls with me, and those that came up to meet with the commission, and several of the agencies did that and invited Caltrans to participate. We had the district directors, the single focal point engineers, myself, other folks from programming in the department. We had conversations on those priorities. We were hoping we'd be funding those priorities. Until the fund estimate was adopted, we had an inkling starting late June that the fund estimate was not going to come out as nicely as we were hoping, but we did not yet have the details regarding the cost increases on our projects. That information comes fairly late so that it's very current. So we, at the initial point, had relatively good outreach. We could have done public workshops and things like that, but we we weren't really making a statewide call for projects that everybody would submit. We're constrained. By the time we got to the final document, that's where we fell short.
Okay. In Director Branson's opening remarks, she mentioned the STIP guidelines that were adopted by the commission.
Yes.
The agency and Caltrans had ample time to comment and give input on those.
Mm-hmm.
And part of those was that the commission, part of those adopted guidelines was to prioritize projects that were in the 2018 STIP going forward in the 2018
Yes.
ITIP and going forward. And so when you made changes and deprogrammed or defunded, however the term you want to use, obviously it was not in concordance with that guidelines that Director Branson read. Can you tell us why the department decided to do that?
Yes, we actually tried to stay within what the spirit of the guidelines, at least, in terms of that the projects that we selected, the three, and the we is my office, and that we did this prior to the executive order coming out. We were already on the path to create capacity so that the state could have some decision-making capabilities of selecting projects during this cycle. We looked to do the least amount of harm to the program and to individual projects. So we specifically looked for projects that had been advanced and that were only using ITIP funding for a phase and that had not opened that phase so it wasn't an active phase. So that for the projects in the 2018 that had partnership funds that were open or that were coming to construction during the cycle, we were not going to touch. So this was really just the projects that we advanced in 27 where we reached beyond what the capacity was, not 27, 2018 reached beyond that capacity with that $107 million. So we limited ourselves to that. And so these are the only three projects that had that situation. There were no others.
Okay.
And it was important. And this was why initially you saw Tulare City had two phases that were being proposed for deletion. But when we found that they had the matching funds, that took that off the table.
Okay.
So this was, if any of these other phases had matching funds, we would have left those alone.
Okay. So the Office of Planning and Research came before the commission last week, and one of the statements they said to us was implementation of the executive order will respect legal boundaries and will not affect already committed funds. The draft reallocates $28,673,000 in Prop 1B money that was specifically meant for SR 99 capacity projects. So when the voters approved Prop 1B and those for the SR 99 corridor, and those funds have been kept in a separate account. We get a quarterly report here at the commission. Yes. Those funds were specifically committed to the corridor. So what was the Caltrans thought process on, I don't want to say breaking that commitment, but didn't the voters commit those funds to the corridor in the past? Whenever exchanges have been made, the dollars have always stayed within the corridor. And so how do you square the statement out of the Office of Planning and Research with the notion of moving $28 million out of the corridor?
So the only dollars moving out of the corridor are the ITIP projects.
Well, but you're swapping them out. The savings, in the past, all savings have been reinvested on the corridor per the guidelines of the Prop 1B SR 99. Right. And they have come out of the separate account. And even if we have done, I am familiar with, a previous swap, but that swap stayed within the corridor.
Yes.
So in here, you're moving dollars and you're unallocated. You're not having them allocated, so potentially they could be moved to other places within the state. So does the Caltrans see that as an issue of seeing funds that were committed, removing committed funds to another location?
So since we haven't committed them, that potential
Okay.
thing hasn't happened.
Okay.
But you bring up a good point on that.
Okay, all right. So, again, these, Director Branson, did you want to say something?
Yes, Mr. Vice Chair, I would like to follow up.
Yes.
So on the Proposition 1B, State Route 99, there is currently a savings balance. And-
Yes.
Yes. And so what would happen here is you'll reduce the ITIP for the $20 million, let's say, and you'll be bringing in a programming action for the commission to
Yes.
consider programming those funds in the State Route 99 Proposition 1B program.
Yes.
So the overall impact that we see is more than a $20 million reduction in funding for the State Route 99 program through this action. Is that correct? Because by pulling the money from the ITIP that's already programmed and moving that into the Prop 1B in lieu of funding a new project on State Route 99, you're reducing the overall program funding for State Route 99.
Yes, I can see how the logic of that works, that since the ITIP was already there and the Prop 1B funds were committed to stay in that corridor.
Right, so if, essentially what I'm saying is, in lieu of bringing in a brand-new project on State Route 99 to the Commission for Programming with Proposition 1B funds, you will not be doing that. You'll be bringing in a project, you'll be requesting the Commission to program the funding that was previously committed in the ITIP. And so that would be a request that would come before the
And
Commission.
that request would come at the same time, I believe, or in the same meeting as the adoption of the STIP itself, that we would do that, both those actions in the same meeting. So at that time, if we haven't actually kept the corridor whole, then that would be a accurate and fair statement, I would say.
Yeah, and I think, just from a staff perspective, just the voter intent of the commitment to the State Route 99 and the focus on that corridor through Proposition 1B, ideally with the savings, we're reinvesting in brand-new projects, so.
So if I may broaden the corridor definition, the way we're looking at it and the way it's depicted in the ITSP, the San Joaquin route is within that corridor as well. And the passenger and the freight rail services both are there, as well as some other facilities and services that are in the corridor. So that, in essence, an investment on one of those is still an investment in the corridor. So if the ITIP funding in the decision-making process between now and the December 15th, when we submit the final to you, if at that time we identified a San Joaquin Valley project on the San Joaquin corridor for the 20 million funding, then in essence, it wouldn't have been removed from the corridor. It would be to a different mode.
And I'll
within
turn
the
it,
corridor.
I'll turn it back to the Vice
but-
Chair, but
but I-
I would just say without seeing, with this draft proposal, just having a reserve without an identified project makes it extremely difficult. So thank you.
Yes, and
Vice
presuming if, yes. So, and it's important, even though I alluded to that possibility, I can't make a commitment that that's what would be proposed.
So further questions from the commission. Does Caltrans understand that deletion and deprogramming are the same thing? I think
well-
that was that-
As a Caltrans representative, they are different actions
okay?
for us.
And if something's deprogrammed, so you would make a distinction between deprogramming and deletion, right?
Yes.
So if something's deprogrammed, when will they be reprogrammed?
It depends on the availability of the funding. We, as you may be aware in the SHOP program, we take these kinds of actions quite often for project-specific and program funding levels, where we have to deprogram things that are in the outer years to create the capacity so that we can address some project needs. That's not uncommon, but the projects aren't deleted. They don't disappear to never be seen again.
Okay. Would the projects proposed in the draft ITIP be different if the governor's executive order had not been issued?
No. As I mentioned earlier, we were already doing this exercise, and it was just coincidental that the executive order came out, and I don't know exactly. I think it was like September 27th, 28th, or something of that nature. And we submitted the document to the commission on October 1st, and we were working on posting it on Friday, the 29th. We'd already done all this work, but because we hadn't pushed the print button yet, we were able to go and put the executive order to reference it in the document
Okay.
before it was posted.
So can we,
In my presentation.
sorry. Okay, so the Raymer to Burnson double track project,
Yes.
that was originally programmed back in 2012 in the STIP?
That has been a longstanding rail project and regional priority based on the needs that were identified.
So what,
past.
yeah, and you touched on it in your presentation,
Yes.
but what specifically happened that caused it to be deleted from this draft? Because it's been in the works for about 8 years.
It has been, and it was in the environmental phase, and that work is still valid that was done. We received quite a lot of local opposition to the particulars of the project, and as I understand it, there was also indications that the scope of that investigation needed to broaden because it was affecting adjacent at-grade intersections and such that needed to be examined. But more important, that service in that corridor with this improvement was affecting a 30-minute train service, and the interests of Metro and the state was to be focusing on even more frequent service, and the investments at the Link Union Station project provides that opportunity to invest. When we come back out to, I'm certain we'll come back out on that project in the future, but not within certainly not within the 2020 and probably not the 2022 cycle.
Okay. The station platform improvements proposed in the plan along the San Joaquins at Merced and Fresno.
Yes.
They cite that the notion of the Morning Express as being the reason needed for this. My understanding is the Morning Express service has been trimmed back. Does that change anything on those two projects?
I don't believe that it would change those projects because those platforms are needed, and the state is working that the service hasn't yet developed the ridership that's needed. We're not abandoning the developing of the ridership, and when that ridership through other means and in conjunction with this builds, we're going to need those platforms. So it would be short-sighted of us to remove them and then try to bring those back in at a later date with the
Okay.
rail.
So the Link Union Station is a project that has come before the commission to examination of the funding buckets there. Is there
Yes.
someone from Metro who could describe all the different funding buckets they're going to be utilizing to complete this?
Yes, there are, and I believe they have a speaker card in as well.
Okay, great,
So they will be giving you
fantastic.
the details. Go ahead, get in there and get those
Okay.
details. Yeah.
Just make sure I got everybody's questions asked here. So there was questions about the future ITIP programming considerations. There was some testimony in Modesto about projects that were apparently in an earlier, a long time ago draft of an ITIP or in the ITIP and then dropped. And then how do those projects get reprogrammed for future, into the category of future ITIP programming consideration on page 36, what it says of the draft?
Okay,
And you can, if you need to come back and answer this later, you can. I mean,
okay.
I'm
Well,
kind of
I
getting
may
down
be
into
able
the
to just
pages
see-
of the document here. I
see-
don't want to.
which corridor that is that,
It's just that testimony was given in Modesto about projects and quarters that were included in future ITIP program consideration in prior ITIPs.
yes,
But for various reasons, they were dropped over time.
right. So
And on page 36 of this draft, it says, based upon SB1, which stabilizes STIP funding going forward, it is anticipated that new projects will be programmed in the 2022 ITIP cycle.
Yes.
ITIP cycle. So would it now be appropriate to put these projects that were in prior ITIPs into the future ITIP programming considerations if they're consistent with the ITSP and consistent with the freight mobility plan?
So for the consistency with the ITSP and for the 2022 ITIP cycle, there will be a new ITSP. So that those corridors would need to be identified. Now, presumably, those corridors are on the interregional road system, so they're eligible if they're actually highway projects. But whether they're focused on the strategic priorities of where we want to invest, that may be something different, not knowing the specifics of the highway. When, in 2016, we, as you may recall, we had to delete quite a few projects, and in that deletion, and those projects were actually removed, and in that, we lost regional share funding as well, and essentially those projects became no longer viable. We didn't have a funding path forward on them and would have to come back in and start again because the loss of so much, not just time, but all of the funding evaporated, and they hadn't progressed far enough to be actually like stable projects. So those projects would be eligible to come back in. Some of them are actually on these same strategic corridors, so that we would welcome them. And it will depend on.
So you don't want to identify
capacity.
them as future projects in the document, though? At this point?
That's a section that we can consider, that,
Okay.
you know, that there's.
Yeah, there is a
doesn't anything to
section
preclude
set
us
aside
from
in the
that, yeah.
document for future projects, and I guess the question was,
to actually
should we
specify
kind
what
of
those are.
start specifying what's coming in the future?
Yeah, and that would be difficult because, again, this is governed by the 2015 ITSB
Yeah,
and
that's a good point.
the next one will have, presumably, there'll be an awful lot of overlap. We're not adding any new highways to the state highway system, so, and I don't believe the legislature will wind up gutting the interregional road system either.
Okay. Director Benson, is there any other clarifying questions you have for Teresa? Is there any more? Okay, at this time, thank you, Bruce. At this time,
Thank you.
I will open the hearing. If you have not already done so, please turn in a speaker card to Doug for if you would wish to speak. I will call Jeanette Owens from LA Metro.
Good morning, Commissioner, Executive Director, and staff. I'm here to do a brief presentation on the Link Union Station project. Let me see. I'm not sure if you're familiar with Los Angeles Union Station. Great. So this is just a picture of what Los Angeles Union Station looks today. It was actually built like this in 1939. Metro purchased it in 2011, about 47 acres all across the rail lines surrounding the LA River as well. As you can see here, this is a stub-ended station when it was built in 1939. So the throat is located further north up there, right where you see the end of that station. The stub-ended tracks is where the south is, and it ends right where the US 101 freeway is located today. The high-rise tower to your left there is, to your right, I'm sorry, is the Metro Gateway office headquarters. So all trains enter and exit through the north end of that station. So pretty much all the Amtrak, all the Metrolink trains, or any other regional rail trains that would like to use Union Station would have to queue. So they would have to idle in the station, wait anywhere from 15, 20, 40 to sometimes 1 hour to take a line, first come, first serve, to come out of that station, because they enter and exit through one end of Los Angeles Union Station. The significance of Link Union Station is that Los Angeles Union Station is the largest multimodal hub, transit, and rail terminal in Southern California. We serve approximately 100,000 passengers a day. And little been known to us that in the next 8 years, between the Super Bowl, the World Cup, as well as the Olympics, by 2028, we anticipate serving over 200,000 passengers coming into Union Station. The Link Union Station with run-through track capability, so converting it from a stub-ended track to a run-through track, will increase capacity by 60%, not changing any of the platforms. As you can tell here, we have approximately 7 platforms. 1 platform is shared with our light rail, Gold Line. But with the Link Union Station project and converting it to run through, we're able to increase capacity as well as accommodate a whole new future high-speed rail service. So this kind of gives you an overview of the Link Union Station project. The total project cost is roughly $3 billion, and it's phased into 2 phases. Phase A is largely funded, and that is where the ITIP 2020 program dollars is going into the Phase A. It will support early track and signal work by Metrolink. So I don't know if you've ever seen the 60-minute show on the New York MTA where their signal and communication is very, very dated. Ours may not be as old, but it's pretty there. It was built in 1939. So our rail comms and signals will not in any way be able to accommodate a sophisticated phasing plan. Because even though we are proposing a $3 billion project in Union Station, all trains and all buses must continue to operate, and we must serve the 100,000 passengers that use it today. So a large cost for us is carrying that soft cost to making sure that anyone who uses Los Angeles Union Station is able to still use it. We have trains, regional rail trains between Amtrak, Metrolink coming into Union Station, approximately 188 trains from 4 a.m. in the morning on a weekday to 10 p.m. at night. And we all know that 4 a.m. to 10 p.m. is actually their scheduled time, so we may need to adjust if there's a slight delay here or there. Phase B is not funded. That's really raising the rail yard, but the Phase A will provide that run-through track capability. Here is, Bruce just kind of showed you an overview of what the Phase A funding program is. It's building the entire run-through track that can also accommodate the future high-speed rail. So it's a concurrent investment for any future high-speed rail service. This is the funding plan that you requested to see. We have $423 million of Prop 1A funds. Metro signed a MOU on September 12 with High Speed Rail and California State Agency for the $423.3 million. We received TIRCP dollars of $337.6 with the reprogramming of the $60.8 million on ITIP. And Metro has invested $65 million, and we have other high-speed rail funds for $18.7, as well as Metrolink funds for $40 million and Amtrak for $5 million, for the total project cost of roughly $950 million. This is a summary of our project schedule. Metrolink is going to take the lead. One of our high-risk items for the Link Union Station project is the rail comms and signals, mainly because we have 188 trains that will continue to use it daily. So we do not intend to disrupt operation and service. So Metrolink is moving forward with construction as early as January, so in a few months. We are already in the process of our real estate acquisition. And our intent is to complete the real estate acquisition as soon as possible in order for us to maintain the project budget. As you know, in Southern California, 1 year delay in real estate market could have quite an impact on your project budget. And so this kind of gives you an outline of where we are, and we hope to be completed by 2026, 2027 at the latest. We also have a video, should you want to see. It's a Rolls-Royce version of what Link Union Station could be. It's really a creative vision meant to inspire and transform Los Angeles Union Station to a truly world-class transit terminal station. I always compare this to the Nokia Live Theater, Nokia Live area, where I was there when it opened in 2006. And 10 years later, today's 2019, no one would have imagined the development that occurred in that station. We're using the model that our a CEO, and my boss, Rick Clark, did at Denver Union Station when they converted Denver Union Station to what it is today. So if you have time to do the video, I have a video for you if you'd like to see it. Sure.
Since 1939, Los Angeles Union Station has connected communities across the Los Angeles region. Today, a population of over 20 million people, Union Station is central to the transportation renaissance taking place in LA today. The new landscaped West Plaza sits between the new retail and the new modified expanded passageway. Entering the passageway, 88 decibel vertical circulation provides access to the passenger platforms above, with service to the Gold Line, high-speed rail, Metrolink, and Amtrak. Retail kiosks adjacent to the core retail space line the route through the new modified expanded passageway. The new high-speed rail will connect Los Angeles to San Francisco. Descending back down, retail and waiting areas are located in the new modified expanded passageway. Entrance to the renovated red and purple lines, as well as ticketing, is at right. Link Union Station project is designed to meet the long-term needs of Union Station while transforming it into a world-class transit and mobility hub.
So with this project, trains can literally idle as little as 5 minutes and operate like a light rail. So I conclude my presentation today and here to answer any questions that you may have.
Do you have any questions, Director Benson? Yes.
The transit intercity funding, is that a committed funds already from the 2018 cycle?
Yes,
Okay.
we've already, you have already approved an allocation for the Link Union Station project dating back since last year.
For the pre-construction, but not construction. So I just want to make sure that the commitment for construction funds identified are fully committed from that program.
That is something that we're working on right now. We have other funding sources. As you can tell, Metrolink has roughly $40 million of their own funding sources. So they're going to start construction with the $40 million that they're going to commit, as well as other funds that we may have. So we are, in the next 6 months to 8 months, we are working on submitting an allocation once we're ready for construction in regards to that. So we have a lot of variety of different funding sources, and so we want to be able to make sure we use what's available first as well.
We're just looking at the Transit Intercity Rail Capital Program. It looks like the allocations would start in 2021 for construction, 2020, is what the schedule is 2021 through 21, 22, and 21, 22, 23, excuse me.
Yes, it was important to making sure that since it was, the ITIP was already programmed for 2021, we wanted to make sure we were consistent with that. So we made sure we phased our construction as consistent with that program, so that it worked really well. In addition to that, it provided the regional benefits. Our other transit agencies and Transportation Commission, for example, Riverside is looking into a Coachella Express. That Coachella Express that can look into bring a new intercity rail all the way to serve the Coachella is also part of the Union Station. We're able to accommodate all that future growth into Union Station. Virgin Trains USA, who's all in the process of building their Las Vegas to Victorville line and will be done by 2023, has already reached out to coordinate with us because they are not satisfied with Victorville. They want to bring it into Los Angeles County and connect it to Los Angeles Union Station through our regional rail, both Metrolink and Amtrak. And all that future growth is accommodated at Link Union Station, and that's the reason why we needed to start with the nucleus. Therefore, all our other rail corridors can easily support the expansion of our regional rail system throughout all of Southern California.
Okay, and so the 60, essentially $61 million that's being asked to be programmed into the ITIP for 2021 would be in addition to the $58 million that you have in the Transit and Intercity Rail program, correct?
Yes.
Okay, and so this project's been on the books for a long time. So I guess my question is, at what point did you guys realize, hey, we're going to need another $60 million? Because as you said, we programmed this past year for out of the Transit and Intercity Rail, and we had programmed the 57 or $58 million for 2021.
We were always in need of the $60 million, and so we just decided, because the Raymer Burnson is an important project,
Right.
it's just that we wanted to, in working with Metrolink has a Southern California optimized rail expansion plan, and we work with them on how they want to phase the growth of the regional rail system. Metrolink is our operator of our rail lines, of our commuter rail lines, and also we contract with them to do the dispatching of the right-of-way in LA County, because all the right-of-way in LA County for Class 1 railroads, it's either owned by Metro, owned by Union Pacific, or owned by BNSF. So when they came up with a plan to look into phasing it a little bit better, because it's the first time they've ever came up with a Southern California optimized rail expansion plan, we work with them and we all decided that it's best to start and invest it in the nucleus, and then we'll continue to expand that further out to the rail corridors. So it was more of working more collaboratively and closely and actually doing hard-earned. We spent a lot of dollars in engineering and physical modeling to making sure that we truly prioritize our regional rail system, especially given in the last 3 years alone. We have been taxed with making sure that we're going to serve both the Super Bowl, the World Cup, and the Olympics. I mean, 3-4 years ago, we would never have imagined that we would have all those large international events coming into Southern California.
Okay.
So it requires a regrouping of the mind and thinking outside the box in order to help facilitate what improvements we need more now.
Okay. Maybe at some point I'll ask staff. I don't want to get into the minutia of it. I still am trying to figure out when it was identified that you were short on that portion of the funding that would require additional money out of the ITIP for this phase. So that's the only. So, but I don't want to
Okay.
to spend forever on it. But thank you very, very much. Is there anything
you.
else?
Nope, that was
Okay,
it. Thank you
great.
so
Thank
much
you.
for your time.
Okay, the next, go ahead. Did you want to clarify anything while we're on this topic?
We'll
Go
reiterate
ahead,
my
state your name for
intro
your
just to be able to
statement.
add a little bit more detail. I think I just want to make sure to recognize that, as Jen mentioned, there's been kind of a longstanding planning process around the optimized, rail system in Southern California with Link Union Station as being kind of the hub of that. And, I don't want to necessarily, have it left that, the use of the 60.8 million in ITIP funds is kind of a near-term, thought. That had been a part of the considerations as, the SCORE program was presented to California State Transportation Agency, for consideration for Trans-City Rail Capital Program funding. It was a part of the ongoing conversation across all the parties that Jeanette had referenced and how we would be looking to best utilize the resources that had been previously identified, along with the opportunity for new resources in, the broader MetroLink system. So it was kind of an assumption of revenues that could be able to support the SCORE program, recognizing that Link Union Station falls under that award. That has been made by the California State Transportation Agency for the SCORE program and is looked at, again, as kind of a near-term priority for, the use of those funds with broad benefits that go beyond the Ventura County line, where the monies were first identified for. Thank you.
Great, thank you very much. Okay, Mayor Cantu from Kern Cog.
Yes.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Thanks for taking the time to provide this hearing. I'm grateful for the opportunity. I'm going to read most of my information, that way I can stay on point. And so I'll start off. First of all, my name is Manuel Cantu, Mayor for the City of McFarland. I was born and raised in McFarland, also known, thanks to Disney, as McFarland, USA. Didn't get a chance to make the final cut. My wife did. It was a great opportunity for us, for a small Gurian Hispanic community like ours, to have something great come to our community. And it's been a wonderful economic boost for us as well. So anyways, moving on. I'm here because Freeway 99 alone has become a lifeline to our city. And unlike cities, perhaps here in Southern California, this is the only freeway we have that sustains our economy. This is it. This is our lifeblood. This is how we get production. This is how we get businesses. This is how we get jobs. This is what we depend on to grow our communities along the 99. My request on behalf of the City of McFarland and the cities that I represent on the Kern Cog Board is to oppose the funding removal of up to $32 million that will halt the completion of widening on Freeway 99 and Highway 46. This, we believe, was and is a desire and the will of the residents of California, specifically in the Central Valley, when we initially voted and then defended SB 1. We also believe it is an unethical measure to change how funding will now specifically move or prioritize to meet interests of state departments after the vote was taken, especially if this prioritizing was not detailed on the ballot when the vote was taken. As we already know, the ag industry is the largest industry in California, and it is directly impacted by travel and goods movement on Freeway 99 and Highway 46. California's ag industry serves a large percentage of Hispanic communities whose economic sustainability and vitality depend on Highway 99 and its massive footprint of connecting highways and roads that span from Bakersfield beyond Sacramento into Red Bluff. Therefore, not completing the widening and safe travel of Freeway 99, Highway 46 is holding out on vital infrastructure that sustains jobs and goods movement that all communities, which are predominantly agrarian and Hispanic in Central California, depend on. And although we value public transit, it does not directly sustain the way of life of the communities in the Central Valley. Governor Newsom ran on a promise to support the Central Valley because he understood the value that this region brings to our state's economy and to the Californians that reside there. High-speed rail has become a massive investment that we've already undertaken. This transit project will begin in the Central Valley of all places, right? And there is no evidence to show how this investment affects our local economies and or how it will positively impact a way of life as compared to how highways and freeways do today, such as 99 and 46. We know its plan originally was designed to directly benefit metropolitan areas such as those in Southern California and Northern California, and we feel that we're in the middle. And at some point in time, we have to take a position to represent and also find ways to continue to make ourselves a valued network or a valued region within the state of California. You know, there's I believe, from my experience working on COGS, working with Valley COGS, that we have to understand that there is a portion that's in the middle, almost like the middle child, you know, the one that always gets left behind. And that's how we feel at times. You know, what about us? Most of the transportation drives through McFarland. It drives through Fresno. It drives through all our communities, Madera in particular. And yet we forget that this is the core, the center that connects both of these two regions. And our fear is that we are being forgotten through this recent change or prioritization of money. Thanks to, let me start with saying that Highway 46 in particular, known for its life-taking stretch of road, known for many as Blood Alley, continues today to take the lives of residents and travelers in our communities. And I share this with you because I'm employed and I drive every day on 46 to Los Hills, California. Thanks to the wonderful company, one of the state's largest grower and employer in the Central Valley, employer of many residents, they're gracious enough to make attempts and investments to preserve life on this dangerous highway, which has taken the lives of our employees driving to work or homes to their families. The wonderful company has placed large signs along 46 to encourage travelers to drive safely, and I didn't have time to put these up there, and I do have them here on my phone. These signs read, 60 deaths on Highway 46 since 2006. Please drive safely. The state and Caltrans need to focus on the numbers of lives we can save versus numbers on a reserve or reserve dollars on a budget line item. We are expecting that Governor Newsom will continue through with his one promise, or this promise that he made to the Central Valley, to support the safe travel and economic sustainability of the Central Valley. This is the way he can do that, or else the only regions rising in California will be the Southern and Northern California metropolitan cities. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mayor. Our next speaker will be Aaron Hakimi.
Good morning, Commissioner, Susan, Teresa, and Douglas. It's a pleasure to be here. I'll start off with some positive comments. We truly appreciate what SB1 has done. We're very supportive, as you know. We had Congressman Thomas here at the hearing last week. He was a local supporter. We truly, truly appreciate the money that SB1 is bringing to Kern County. And Bruce, we also appreciate the investment on Highway 99 and 46 over the years. We truly appreciate that because those investments, like Mayor Cantu mentioned, are saving lives. They're saving lives the day those projects are delivered. I'd like to remind everyone that over $100 million has been invested in Highway 46 that has come directly from our elected officials in the form of earmarks or grants through the federal government. So when people say we have not brought money to the table, that absolutely is not true. The projects on 99 and 46 have been true partnerships over the last 2 decades. I want to specifically thank Caltrans and the Commission for the recommendation in the draft ITIP to continue funding the Y at the intersection of 46 and 41. That project is absolutely critical to motorists in Kern County. The majority of the people that are driving through that stretch of Highway 46 are not from San Luis Obispo County. They're from Kern County or Los Angeles County or the Southern Valley. That project will, on the day it opens, save lives, absolutely. And I want to make it clear that the three projects that many of us in the Central Valley are upset about, the one on 46 and the two on Highway 99, all three of those segments are exactly the same way they were when those projects were delivered originally, well over 50 years ago. On my drive down here this morning, imagine if Southern California had the same road network that it had 50 years ago. Imagine if Sacramento had the same road network that it did 50 years ago. Yet we're being asked to keep waiting to finish three segments of two freeway, one on 46, and not choose to upgrade sections of road that are the same way that they were 50 years ago. You all know our population has grown exponentially in the last 50 years, and traffic on those routes have grown. A few more points, if you would please bear with me. You know Kern COG is a metropolitan planning organization. We are responsible to set regional priorities as part of our long-range plan and our short-range program. That's the Regional Transport RTP and FTIP, as we call it. The draft ITIP does not reflect Kern COG's latest regional priorities, and it is not consistent with our federally designated responsibilities as a congestion management agency. And for the record, I'd like to read a couple of sections from the draft ITIP. On page 2, Commissioner, you brought this out. Government Code Section 14526 says the draft ITIP should be presented after consultation with transportation planning agencies. I want to make it crystal clear, for the record, that consultation did not take place. If it had, we would have gladly talked with Caltrans, both headquarters and district, about what is contained in the draft. I'd also like to, for the record, direct your attention to page 14 of the draft ITIP, specifically item 5 on that page that says, I quote, deletion, doesn't say deprogramming, it says deletion of 3 currently programmed 2018 projects. Later on in that paragraph, it says total savings from deletions. I can read, I understand what deletion means, and so can the residents of our county. I know I'm taking a little bit longer, but let me just close with this. There's 2 more quick items, and Paul, you mentioned this too. There's $30+ million of passenger rail funding in this draft ITIP for extending platforms on the existing Amtrak line. $30+ million. The rough total of what we're talking about on the 299 projects and 46 project is in the ballpark of the same area. How can we, so that's extending platforms for a service that is likely to possibly not be in existence in a few years. It may move over to high-speed rail. As the commissioner mentioned, the project is specifically identified to support the morning service, which has already been canceled due to low ridership. But how can we possibly, as public servants, with a straight face, say we're going to delete projects on 46 and 99 that will save lives the day that those projects are delivered in order to invest in projects like the platform extension that have zero nexus to safety and have a very questionable nexus to saving any greenhouse gases. So let me end with this. Rather than delete the projects in the rural areas of the state, please consult with the MPOs. We would be more than happy on the 46 project to work with Caltrans and the CTC to arrive at a compromise. We can live with something less than a gold-plated project. We would love to have conversations about a truck climbing lane instead of a full 4-lane widening. We don't think we need to spend $15 million on design. We could literally live with $3 or $4 million of improvements on 46. But because there was no consultation, those conversations have not taken place. We welcome those conversations. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hakimi. Next will be Ted Smalley.
Thank you, Commissioner and Susan and friends. Ted Smalley from Tulare County Association of Governments. I did get a chance to speak last week, so I will try not to repeat any comments, but just add to it. I would note, in agreement with Aaron, that we are very thankful to you all with Prop 1B. It has been amazing what's been done. And I'll say we're really appreciative of it because before that, not 1 inch in 99 was widened in our county, not 1 inch. So since then, we have, with what is proposed, nearly 20 miles will have been widened in our county. I would note the cost effectiveness of widening in the valley. I think, and I thank Bruce for correcting that last meeting. Widening mostly in the valley, except a few areas, is widening to the median. And while $14 million is a lot of money, I can't write in a check for transportation dollars for a goods movement national corridor. Where else can you build and be that cost effective with money? I would note that, and I work with Bruce and we work with many years. Again, I get frustrated by certain things being presented that are somewhat silo presented, and that graphic about what we're partnering on 99 doesn't tell a complete picture. I would just also remember we chose 2006 forward because if you add the previous 30 years, you would have a big zero for Tulare County and widening. We are a real partner to Caltrans. And I get frustrated, if not very upset, at any discussion that would suggest otherwise. We have 30 to 40 open partnerships with our district. Our district and TCAG know how to partner and work together. We don't work in silos, and that's exactly the comments that are coming out right now. Well, you don't have this match for this component. That's just garbage to suggest that's how planning works. We sit down with our district and we look at 30 to 40 projects. How do you fund them? We put all the fund types on the table and we work together. That's what consultation is. And we do this all the time. And I wish you would come down, or others, and especially headquarters, and see how real good partnerships work. Because we have put down, to put in perspective, every penny of the RTIP goes to Caltrans. Not one penny goes to anything else, and has been for ever since our measure's been passed. Of our CMAQ program, I don't have the exact percentage, but I know over $25 million over the next 7 years is going to Caltrans for roundabouts. Of our measure, we have a measure's pretty simple. We have half of it to rehab, and of the regional road program, 90% goes back to Caltrans. To put in perspective, on the 99 corridor, which wasn't quite explained very well, you have interchanges and you have widening. And oftentimes the interchanges can be built with the widening, or they can't be. We strategically worked with our district, say, you know what? If we pull the interchanges out, that means neither one will hold up the project. And any project you hold up can cost 3 to 5% a year. So why would we combine them if we can save the taxpayers money? So let me put in perspective. We have already bonded with our small county and our small measure to deliver $25 million to Cartmill, $35 million to Betty Drive. We are going to bond and deliver another $35 million, depending on the local partnership program, which is a plug, by the way. And the Caldwell interchange, that means our measure has put in $125 million, our small county, to the 99 corridor to match. Do you know how much Caltrans has done to match all those interchanges? Zero. It's all been from the RTIP and from our measure. And I understand we're going to turn around and say, well, the ITIP's only for widening and all this. Look, you need to understand, in order to deliver projects and save the state money, we break things apart. And we look at the best funding sources to deliver projects quickly. And we need to have a recognition of that. So any discussion that we are not a partner simply because there isn't money on this design phase is simply ludicrous and nonsense. We need to realize that silo planning doesn't work. This is the way real partnerships work. You sit down and you take 10 funding sources and you work together. I would just reiterate one point I made before, is that on top of all this, our agency and Caltrans District have partnered to always look for cost savings. And you, Commission, rightfully so, are very challenging when cost increases come forward. We dread coming before you. But here we're coming forward with the thing that we think's cool. Cost savings. I mean, wow, we want to be patted on the back, not slapped upside the head. And instead, that's exactly what happened, is a slap to the face of our district and TCAG when you take cost savings and say, great, you guys save money, we're going to give it to somebody else, and we're going to take one of your phases away that happens to equal the same amount. This isn't how you treat partners. This isn't how you reward and incentivize folks. And when it comes to deprogramming, whatever fun words you want to use, the deprogramming always came with a recommendation of how it would be put back. Deprogramming it back would say, at a minimum, it would be prioritized in the next round. It would be prioritized potentially from the trade corridor. There is no recommendation whatsoever from that. And that would suggest, and trust me, much like you, my phone is ringing off the hook of people telling us, this is what we told you, Ted. The state, as soon as the recall was blocked, is going to turn around and hurt the valley. And that's the message I have to deal with, and some of you have to deal with, and it's not right. We need to make sure 99 continues to get done. We are thankful for the Tegas Ranch moving forward by all means, but we can't punish people when they've done a good job. Our district has done a good job to save money. Why in the world would we send that message? So I want to thank you again to let us comment, and I would ask at a minimum that this funding be restored, or it has been given a priority to put in the trade corridor program. And I'll be happy to answer any questions if you have them. Thank you.
Thank you, Ted. Eric Sauer.
Good morning, Vice Chair Van Kunyenberg, Executive Director Susan Branson. My name is Eric Sauer. I'm Senior Vice President of the California Trucking Association. As you know, freight supports 1 out of every 3 jobs in the state, and 80% of all goods movement is performed by trucks. This is all made possible by California's extensive network of roads, highways, and bridges. CTA would like to offer our support for the local agencies bringing forth worthy projects to preserve and improve this network. We also would like to offer our concern regarding testimony we heard before this commission last week, where it was noted that a top-down direction had been given to remove worthy road projects from the ITIP without consultation with those affected. I believe our comments are included in the packets that were given out today. The CTA took a controversial position and supported SB 1 and Prop 69 and opposed the Prop 6 repeal effort. We actually lost quite a few members from our position of supporting it, but we also understood the importance of making the investment in California's infrastructure. During that process, we had extensive discussions with our members, assuring them that these new taxes would be directed primarily to fix-it-first road and bridge projects. We are now hearing concerns from those same members that those assurances are not being honored. We urge the Commission, the administration, and the legislature to adhere to the principles that made SB 1 such a success, and look forward to working with you as the process moves forward. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Eric. Okay, I'm going to give one last chance if anyone else wants to comment. Seeing none, I will now close the hearing and make a few comments myself. On page 37 of the report, it says two things. It says, in many areas of the state, the STIP is the sole source of funding for improvements to the state highway system. And then it also makes a statement, the demand for the department's ITIP funding greatly exceeds its capacity. In the last 3 weeks, I guess 2 weeks, excuse me, the temperature has gone up pretty significantly on this issue. I think we can't deny the elephant in the room that, there's a lot of, all of our phones have been ringing. There's a lot of tumult here. I would like to suggest, and this was made at our last hearing, is that a lot of what we could do at this point is maybe go back to this notion of real engagement with stakeholders now, between now and December 15th. Let's recommit ourselves, all of us in this room, to engage as stakeholders, to come together and really partner on this. And I would encourage that from the agency and Caltrans, and I would encourage that from the local partners as well. I think there's an opportunity for everyone to, not to use the cliche, but a win-win. When you look at all of the different funding sources for rail in this state, I am challenged by the notion that we can't achieve what everybody wants to achieve in rail. Rail projects are traditionally difficult, as we see by the project that we have, that we are actually removing from the project today in terms of the Raymer segment, is that oftentimes rail projects will go and go and go and then have to be deleted later, or they're very difficult to deliver in a timely manner. But what we want to do is I think from an administration standpoint, we want to make sure that they achieve the goals that they want to achieve. But on the same token, we want to achieve the goals that the locals want to achieve. It just, in the presentation by Caltrans today, I noted that it shows that Tulare City being constructed by 2024. Well, to get it done construction-wide by 2024, we would have to start this phase that's being deleted from the ITIP would have to be done on schedule for it to be completed on time in 2024. So, there's a bit of a disconnect in some of these things. But I would just encourage those who are watching from their offices right now, let's not seize the temptation to go to our corners and fight. Let's take this time, turn down the heat, get together. Let's have some meetings between Caltrans and the local agencies. I want to just echo that, it's been my pleasure to get to know Caltrans District 6, and what they do in Tulare in terms of partnerships is admirable and is an example to the rest of the districts throughout the state. They really are a good partner, and they really do work well together. So I know that great things can happen when we sit down and really engage with each other, and we have that opportunity between now and when the next when we see the next submittal in December, to really engage with each other and come up with something that is better than what we have today. I truly believe we can do that, and Director Branson, are there any further comments you have at this time?
I think, Vice Chair, you summed it up very nicely. Just to reiterate, the purpose of this hearing and the prior hearing is to hear all the comments and concerns to inform Caltrans as they evaluate and review all those comments and respond to those comments. So we will be looking at a reconciliation of those comments in your next plan that you submit to the commission in December. So the goal would be to reconcile and address those comments and bring forward a ITIP that there's an agreement on with the agencies throughout California. So we're hoping for that. Anything as commission staff that we can do to assist Caltrans in that effort, please be sure, I'm looking at Bruce, to let us know. Thank you.
Teresa, could you just go through the schedule now of what will occur for the STIP and specifically for the ITIP for everyone who's watching online? What are the next steps in the calendar?
So from now until November 15th, that is when Caltrans will take final comments from the ITIP. So it would be, that will be the opportunity to collaborate on, coordinate, and just have conversations. So after the final ITIP is due on the 15th of December. All the projects that are proposed need to be fully funded, fully committed. Just want to emphasize that in the final ITIP. After December 15th, staff will compile, all the RTIPs and the ITIPs are due at the same time. Staff will compile all that information, and as normal, we will consult with the regions for clarifications, and the state as well, Caltrans. The North hearing will be on January 30th in Sacramento. The South hearing will be February 6th. The purpose of the hearings is for the regions have the opportunity to talk about the RTIP, as well as Caltrans has an opportunity to talk about the final ITIP that is being proposed. The regions also have an opportunity to also comment on the final ITIP as well, and the state has an opportunity to comment on the RTIPs as well. Staff recommendations will be released February 28th, and the CTC will adopt the STIP March 25th of 2020.
If you are watching online and you wish to make a comment, the comment period is open now between November 15th. We encourage you to send your comments in via letter. With that, this hearing is adjourned.